Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast with your host, Douglas Wood, author of From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. In each episode, Doug interviews distinguished legal professionals who have masterfully navigated their careers from inception to retirement and explores the intricacies of building a successful law practice and transitioning to retirement when the right time comes. Now, let's join Doug for today's insightful discussion.
Welcome to the Dawn to Dusk podcast. I'm Doug Wood, your host, and my guest today is Sherry Young, the founder and shareholder and past president of the law firm Rath, Young and Pignatelli. I'll get that right, Sherry.
Yeah.
Where she still remains the chair of the environmental practice group. Sherry focuses her practice on environmental law, public and private financing, trusts and estates, and nonprofits. She received her BA from Cornell in 1975 and her JD from the Franklin Pierce School of Law at the University of New Hampshire in 1982. Sherry serves on a number of boards. She is vice chair of the Walden Mutual Bank, a director of the University of New Hampshire Foundation, and a member of the Dean's Advisory Board at the Franklin Pierce School of Law. She is past president of the Board of New Hampshire Public Radio, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, and the New Hampshire Supreme Court Society. And if that was not enough, Sherry served as a legislative counsel to then-Governor Judd Gregg and was the first woman to chair the State Capital Group, a worldwide network of leading law firms. A recipient of many legal awards and recognitions, including being named one of New Hampshire's 10 most powerful women. And I can attest, having known Sherry for a long time, that's probably, I think she's number one on that list, but that's a whole other thing. She lives in Concord, New Hampshire, with her son Gary and two wonderful little golden doodles. And I've spent time with all four of them in my career, and she and I served together on the board of trustees of the Franklin Pierce Law Center. That's where we got to know each other. And I've had the pleasure of knowing her and Gary for many years and shared wonderful times with them. And I'm thrilled that she agreed to come on to the podcast. So welcome, Shelly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Sherry, we've known each other a long time, but the listeners and viewers don't know you very well. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, where you grew up, what made you ultimately decide to go to Cornell and eventually become a lawyer.
I grew up in a small town called Rehoboth, Massachusetts, which is about an hour south of Boston. And did very well in high school and was encouraged by teachers and guidance counselors to apply to some of the Ivy League schools. Brown was close by, and that was the one I knew best, but it was also too close to home. So I ended up applying to Cornell, which was far enough away that I felt like I was away, and loved it there. Just had a wonderful time there. And when I graduated, I thought I would like to be a lawyer, but I had no idea what it was all about. And so I went to a paralegal school in Philadelphia for a few months, and then got a job in New York City working for a New York City law firm as a paralegal for 2 years. And that convinced me that I should go to law school.
So what made you end up at Franklin Pierce? How did you make that quantum leap from New York City to the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire?
Well, Gary and I, my husband and I, knew we wanted to be back in New Hampshire eventually. I spent summers up here as a kid, and Gary and I had spent a couple of summers together up here before we were married. And we knew this is where we wanted to live. So I was looking at Boston and New Hampshire, and as it turned out, the only law school in New Hampshire still is UNH Franklin Pierce. So I got into a couple of Boston schools. I got into Franklin Pierce, and the price differential was significant. And that's when I decided, look, and they had a lot of focus on clinics during your 3-year course of study. So I'd be working in the community, getting to know folks in the community. I felt very strongly that if I had that opportunity, then I would have a job. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my color and background, but I felt very strongly that I'd have a job when I got out, and that's how it worked out. my third year of law school, I worked as a law clerk for a firm in Concord, New Hampshire. And then I got a job working for them full time when I graduated.
And that was and how long did you work for them?
I worked for them for 5 years.
And that's when you decided to go out on your own, form your own firm.
Yes. My partner, Tom Rath, who was a former Attorney General of New Hampshire, and I worked together very closely on a number of cases. And we got to be very friendly. And he had the urge to go out on his own, and he convinced me to go with him.
Huh.
So that's how it happened.
So tell us a little bit about your experience in the New Hampshire bar, because there weren't many women in the New Hampshire bar when you started off on your own. I remember it being incredibly dominated by men. What kind of challenges did you face, and how did you deal with them?
Yes, that's absolutely true. First of all, I remember dressing as close to male attire as possible. Navy suits, white shirts, and a little feminine bow tie to fit in. Thankfully, we don't have to do that anymore. And always skirts. There were no such thing as pants on women in those days. So,
Mhm.
um, and for the first few years, Tom and I worked together on most of the cases, and I would follow his lead and listen and learn from him. And I would frequently be the only woman in the room. Now, I would end up doing a lot of the legal work, research, all of that, but Tom would lead the meetings, and I learned an incredible amount from him as a mentor. He was, as I said, he'd been Attorney General. He'd been in private practice for much longer than I, and so he was well known and very accomplished. And so I really followed his lead and learned a lot from him in the first few years. And then as clients got used to working with me and dealing with me, I started taking the lead on more of the matters.
So at some point, you not only had your active law practice, but you also got into the management of the law firm. Ended up eventually becoming president of the law firm. Um,
Right.
how was that balance? How did you deal with that balance between working with your clients and getting all that work done at the same time running an organization and all the headaches that come along with that?
It was very challenging. And if I had it to do over again, I would change the way I handled things because I ended up just working very, very long hours and kept almost the same amount of client work on my plate the whole time. And only toward the end of it did I realize that that was not sustainable and I needed to pull back on my workload and convince the firm that they needed to compensate me accordingly. So initially, I got paid for what I did as a lawyer, not as an administrator.
Hmm.
And then over time, slowly, they learned that it was important to have someone not full. I was a full-time president, but I also was a full-time attorney for a long time. So I just was working really hard. And it
Well,
was
how many lawyers were there in the beginning in the firm,
when we started, we had four,
and how many are there now?
about 45, and then there are five professionals that do legislative lobbying, government relations work at the State House.
So when you
And
became president, how many lawyers were there then?
when I was president, we grew to about 30, 35.
So, so I can understand how you running the organization at the same time having to satisfy clients would have been at easiest week, maybe an 80-hour week. I
Yeah.
mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was working a lot.
So which one, in the end of the day, I mean, which one did you enjoy more than the other? I mean, how did you find satisfaction in both of those ends of the spectrum?
Um, I think more than anything, it was out of necessity that I took on the role of president because we really needed um, discipline in the way we managed the firm. We'd been kind of growing ad hoc and had no policies. And, um, And I realized we were getting it to a size that we really needed to adopt policies and have procedures and have more discipline in the way we approach the management of the firm. So I took that on and I did that for a while. Now we have a management committee of 3 with one as president. And the 3 of them really handle the majority of, but we also have a full-time professional office manager who works directly reporting to the management committee. So
So,
we have a different, very professional structure now, which works out well.
so at this point, if you're not the largest law firm in Concord, you're one of the largest in New Hampshire, right?
We are definitely in the top 10, probably the top 5. Yeah.
That's got to be very rewarding for you to start from 4 to where you are now. That's quite the accomplishment. So
I would caveat that by saying there are other firms that have been acquired by bigger firms
right,
from
right, we won't
Boston
count that.
or otherwise that they are mammoth, but their
Yeah,
New Hampshire presence probably isn't as
right,
large.
right. Yeah, I having been in one of those gigantic law firms in my career, I mean, I didn't know anybody in Pittsburgh, didn't care, but I was in New York, so
Right.
the large mammoth firms are not necessarily mammoth in their locale, in their
I
local.
just I just thought of another thing, going back to your prior question of being the only, being one of the few women in the practice at the time. I remember going to a deposition. We were actually out in California, in San Francisco, and I had a, roller suitcase or roller briefcase. And I came into the office and the receptionist said, "Oh, you can set up over there, dear." And
Thought you were the court reporter.
stenographer, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was a little confused for a minute, and then I realized what she was saying. I said, "Oh, actually, I'm a lawyer. I'm working on this deposition." Got a lot of that.
Yeah. So you did obviously in the course of growing from 4 to the size of the firm today, uh, you hired a lot of young associates, you trained a lot of young associates, turned them into good lawyers. What were some of your techniques? What was the advice you'd give them when they came in on how to be a better lawyer and how to work with clients? What kind of pointers did you teach them?
Well, a couple of things. By the time we started hiring a lot of young associates, we had also added 3 laterals in key areas of practice. So we had, because I did environmental law, Tom did government relations work, um, Mike Pignatelli did litigation. We added tax and energy, alternative energy, and corporate. So we had 3 fairly senior guys that we had added to the group. And so when we started building the younger group, what I would ask them is, for the first year or 2, try to work with all of us. Try to get, work assignments from all the different practice areas, different attorneys, because you'll learn, methods and techniques from what they are doing that you like, that fit you. And you'll learn things that don't fit you at all, that you would not do it that way. And then you'll also hopefully you'll find an area of practice that really resonates with you. And once you do that, then you should declare to the rest of us, I really want to start focusing on tax law or corporate law or whatever. And then we would encourage them to find their footing in that area and really look to the senior partner in that practice group as a mentor and work closely with them to develop their skills and develop their abilities. The other thing that we asked of all of our attorneys is to get involved in the community, to volunteer on boards, and hopefully to become like the chair of a board or an officer on a board, because those leadership skills and responsibilities really, really grow your experience in terms of dealing with client matters and client, uh, legal issues. So we really expect all of our attorneys to give back to the community, and there's innumerable numbers of nonprofits. Concord is the capital of New Hampshire. So it's the center of a lot of nonprofits. It's the center of our state government. So the Attorney General's office is there. A lot of the courts are there. And so volunteering on boards or in a nonprofit way is a really important thing.
So through this all, you obviously built a substantial practice for yourself by acquiring clients and servicing clients. What were your tricks or your methods to gain clients as you built your practice and built your book?
Well, like I said earlier, at first I found what I loved. I had started out in estates and trusts and tax, and that was okay. It was interesting. But then when the Superfund law passed in the early 80s and it started to blow up, Tom and I got one of the first Superfund cases in New Hampshire. And we started working on those and built a reputation around, not just in New Hampshire, but outside, that we understood this new law.
Hmm.
And so we became some of the, primary practitioners in that environmental practice. So I would say finding something that you love, and I loved that. What I loved about it was we didn't really know what the law said. It had been passed in a lame duck Congress with a lame duck president and then jammed through. They'd taken like 40 different bills and tried to make one of them, and it was a mishmash. And so the courts had to decide what the law meant, and there was a lot of litigation over it, needless to say.
Well, I mean, that's the seizing that opportunity. It reminds me of myself to one degree. When I graduated law school in 1976, I went to NYU to get an LLM. And in January 1st, 1978, a new copyright law was coming into effect. And so that's what I studied at NYU was this new copyright law that was coming into effect on January 1. So getting a job turned out to be relatively easy for me because all the law firms that were out there didn't have a clue what the new Copyright Act was. So they needed young talent to tell them what it was.
Right.
So, I was there at the right moment, very lucky. Thank God there was a new Copyright Act. Otherwise, I'm not sure I'd probably be a personal injury lawyer or something. I have no idea. But that sort of was
You'd have
the
been good at that
opportunity.
too, Doug.
Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, but I've often said to young attorneys, there are opportunities. Find that opportunity. Find that niche. Find something that really excites you, like you found environmental law, and look to see where the developments are. Where is it going? And then seize that. And
Yeah.
that's really the seed that can build very large practices, and really, put you where you want to be in terms of your independence and success.
Well,
So that's a really interesting opportunity
what
that you took advantage
that's
of.
that's really what generated the ability for us to go out on our own. Was we had
Yeah,
built such a significant practice out of whole cloth
yeah,
that nobody else in the firm did.
right.
And so it made it fairly easy for us to transition to starting our new firm, and they all followed us.
Yeah. So so now let's flash forward a little bit. Now you're running the firm, president of the firm. By then you had some senior lawyers that were there, and transition or succession planning at some point must have come into your radar. Uh, how did you first deal with that, and what is your thinking in terms of how lawyers need to think about succession planning?
Well, there was one transition that I successfully went through, and that was transitioning out. I'd been president for about 15 years, so that was a significant transition to transition the firm into structuring a new management committee in place and bringing that structure forward, and then transitioning that work over to the committee and the new president. So it took time, and I had to sort of have a foot in both worlds for a while there, having mentoring the new president and the management committee. So that was a transition, and now I'm on my transition toward retirement. I'm not retired yet, and when I'm in Concord, I'm still working fairly full time, but I travel quite a bit. I have 7 grandchildren now, and they're all over the place. So I travel quite a bit to see my kids and my grandchildren and take time off to do that. So I would say about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I tried to recruit my successor, somebody who really had an expertise in environmental law. First, I made the mistake of thinking that I could take a mid-level associate who didn't have that expertise and bring them up. And it became clear to me that that wasn't going to happen in the time frame that I was looking for. So then I started recruiting, and it took a few tries before I could find the right match. I had hired, and then the first one didn't work out very well. The second one worked out great, but he decided he wanted to go back into public service. So he went back to the AG's office, which was a bummer for me. But anyway, so the third was the success, and he's been with me now, I'd say going on 5 years, 4 years.
Mhm.
And, over time, I've introduced him to all of my clients, and over time, my clients have gotten used to working with him. And now many, if not most of them, work directly with him, and he consults me or they consult me if they need me. And otherwise, he's managing those client matters and those clients. There are a few that I love that I still want to stay very involved with, and I do. And when new matters come in, unless it's something I'm really excited about doing on my own, I refer it out to either my successor, Jim, or to someone else in the firm, depending on what kind of legal issues are involved. So I've been transitioning for a while now, and it's working out really well. And so honestly, I think I could retire anytime if I chose to. I just don't choose to. I still love what I do. And I've been able to manage it in a way that I can continue for a while longer.
The one of the points you make, I think, is so critical to this issue is how long it takes. In my experience with lawyers when I ran a law firm and when I ran a large group of a law firm, that many lawyers think about this idea way too late.
Yes.
I talk about the idea that we all have a use by date. We may not know it, but we have it. And sooner or later, as you get more senior, your peers are dropping out at the client level. And the new management coming up is not really particularly interested in the old gray-haired guy. They want to have their peers help them out and sort of feel more comfortable in that environment. So if you hang out and wait too long, you end up putting yourself in a very awkward position where the decisions are made for you rather than by you.
Yes.
And what I admire about the way you took it and went forward with it is you made that choice. You planned it out. You didn't wait for someone to come knocking on your door to say, "Hey, Sherry, take a hike."
It's time.
It is. It's time. But that's more what happens than not. That is,
Uh,
it's far more typical in what I've seen in consulting with law firms and consulting with lawyers is that very few law firms want to even talk about succession. They're afraid of it because they think that the lawyer who is the successful lawyer that they want to keep their practice or whatever it might be, they're almost afraid to talk to them because they what do you mean succession? What are you talking about? I'm going to be here forever. So
yeah.
it's a very awkward conversation. Even at my old firm, which was a giant firm, there was no plan of succession for anybody.
Wow.
I said, well, I'm not going to let them make this decision for me. I'm going to make it for myself. So similar to yours, it was a 5 year, 6 year plan to transition, and that's so. I remember I had a client one time who owned an ad agency and was asked, when do you know the time to sell the agency? And his answer was, if I'm just thinking about that, it's too late. I should have thought about that way earlier and planned for the sale of the
Yes.
agency. So,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
planning ahead is really a huge issue that surprisingly few law firms and lawyers that I've experienced really have that down in any kind of a systematic way. Instead, they just wait and hope what's going on. So, so now, okay, so you are semi or looking at possible retirement. So you are obviously planning some things in your mind, your travel. I assume
Yes.
golf is also a big part of what you're talking about because I know you're a golfer
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you travel. A lot of what I've seen in in lawyers who are sort of lost when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do is they haven't done anything other than practice law. They
Uh,
haven't really built other interests. So tell us a little bit about, what makes your blood flow right now, other than law. Forget law for a second. Where
okay.
does your excitement come from?
Well, you mentioned golf. I love golf. I love golf. I love to hike with my two golden doodles. You mentioned them. So I get out almost every day, rain, shine, snow, whatever, and we hike for up to an hour. And we spend a month in the summer up on Lake Winnipesaukee. I work remotely some, take time off, but we boat, we swim. It's absolutely lovely. It's like where we are on the lake is what the lake used to be like when I was a kid. It's very quiet and it's very restorative. And even though like now I'm working remotely from up there, but
Sure.
even though I work remotely, I dial back a lot when I'm at the lake. My kids and grandkids are all coming in a week for a week and a half, and that'll be crazy but fun.
That'll be nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we travel with them. We travel at Christmas and get together at Thanksgiving somewhere. We go to different places. They don't come to my house. They could care less to come to Concord, New Hampshire, especially in the winter. So we go to Hawaii or my son lives in Laos. So we go to Southeast Asia to different countries and explore those um, different territories. It's a lot of fun.
When I first came down and moved to North Carolina, when I transitioned out, and did remotely for a while, same kind of a model you've done. I had never played golf, and so I came down here to North Carolina and said, "Well, I guess I'm going to take up golf." So I go over to the pro shop and hire the pro. I go out in the course, and he says, "What do you want to work on?" And I said, "Well, everything. I've never done this before." And so he says, he goes, "Wait a minute, hold on. How old are you?" And at the time I was 70. And he says, "You're taking up golf for the first time at 70 years old?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because that's the only sport I know where I can smoke cigars and drink while I'm playing. If you have another sport I can do that on, I'll take up that sport." So then he says to me, "Well, okay, that's fine. I'll teach you what I can, but at your age, you're never going to be really good at this." So I looked at him and I said, if you're going to become a motivational speaker, we're going to have to talk because that's not what you say to me. But I fell in love with it. I stink, but I'm out there all the time,
Yeah, it's
trying
so much
to
fun.
someday break some number that I know I never will. But yeah, so if
Although the drinking doesn't help your scores
you
either.
may be right there, I gotta think a little bit more about that. It's bad. I mean, but they have those carts going by. What are you supposed to say? I don't want to insult the person in the cart. What are you going to do, right? So anyway, but I in my community there's a bunch of golf clubs. All these old farts here in the community, and we go out in groups and stuff. So I'm not so sure we're that concerned about our scores
Yeah.
during the games.
Why would you?
Yeah,
It
right.
just
What's the
spoils the
point? Why
game.
bother? Although I'll say this to you, and you're probably as guilty as any golfer I know. And don't take this as an insult, but I am amazed all the time at how golf is cheap. When what'd you get on that? A five. I go, really? Okay.
Either
But
they
anyway.
cheat or they can't keep good count.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay,
Yeah.
good. They just having a trouble like one, two, three, whatever it is. Really good. So to conclude here, if you were giving advice first to a young new attorney first, and then a senior attorney who's thinking of transitioning, what would your advice be?
A young new attorney, I would say find a good mentor, find someone you really like to work with, then also try to find an area of practice that you really want to work in. Those two I think, are the most important things you can do is find a good mentor, whether they are in the area of practice you want to practice in or not. If they're good at giving you advice and a good sounding board, that's critical. Finding a good mentor and finding the area of practice that you enjoy and then becoming the best you can at it.
And what
So
would you
that,
say to the senior attorney?
well, I think we already talked about that. I think it's to plan your succession and hire your successor and give it time to let it work smoothly, because an abrupt transition is not fair to the firm. It's not fair to your clients. So it's something that you ought to be thinking about for a number of years and working toward that goal over time.
It's the expression I use for that final transition when you're going to actually retire. The expression I use is embracing irrelevancy. That it's okay if you become irrelevant to the prior life, as long as you stay relevant to your new life. And so, it's an interesting sort of psychological thing that goes through. That's what prompted
I don't
me.
like the idea of feeling like I'm irrelevant, but you're right. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, you're not, and it's the other sort of analogy I use is RIP, not rest in peace, but relevancy and progress. So it's the those little cliches,
Yeah.
authors use and stuff like that. But in any event, Sherry, thank you so much for agreeing to be on. I think you've got an incredible story to tell, and I know your history, and we've known each other for a long time, and you've been a great colleague over the years, and facing some, and we don't go into this on this one, but all the mishigash we had when we were on the board of trustees of the Franklin Pierce Law Center, and all the things we did together there were great, and you were an inspiration then, and you still are now. So thank you again, Sherry, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for asking me. This was fun.
Thank you for joining us on the Dawn to Dusk podcast. You can learn more on building and transitioning a multi-million-dollar law practice in Doug's book, From Dawn to Dusk, How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Law Practice and Then Give It Away. If you're interested in working with Doug, suggesting future guests, or have questions you'd like Doug to ask guests in upcoming episodes, reach out to him at douglas.wood@wood.law or visit his website at dawntodusk.wood.law. And if you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your peers. Until next time, we appreciate your viewership.